seeing children that are being killed in these situations, and even parents. So it's a very big deal, and we're just thankful that we can be a part of it and be in a place where, even in the smallest way, that we can reach out and help people and just provide encouragement, because this is a we the people problem that we must fix.
I concur with you completely. Lisa, why don't you go ahead and give us a little bit of background for those people that may not have seen your previous interviews here on the broadcast. Let us know a little bit about yourself and give us a bit of a background. I know you've befriended Mark and Terry, and you've helped them, I believe, with some matters. I don't know specifically what those are, if nothing more than just an ear to hear. Go ahead, Lisa. Tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Well, first, as far as trying to help out Mark and Terry, it's more as far as helping to shine the light and help guide them to hopefully have other attorneys step up and do what's right and help a veteran family whose children were basically kidnapped. It's a way of medical kidnapping, and how I met Terry and Mark was basically because of my personal experience, even as an attorney, where my father was medically kidnapped. So my personal situation involves the elderly. So the two are very much parallel. And so when I forget, Terry, who reached out to who, but we found each other and connected. And Terry has been an incredible voice for other people to help others see what is actually going on. So for me, I've been a practicing attorney in Massachusetts for 25 years. My basic forte has been appellate work, but also I do work through the trial forum. But appellate is my specialty, and basically how I have come into this forum, it's been about a decade that I'm being retaliated as a whistleblower for exposing judicial corruption in the probate and family courts. And what I've done is I filed in 2015 a federal civil action showing the actual racketeering that is going on in the probate and family court system. Basically, the courts are not, as we can see, are not the answer at this point. However, we still have to keep on going. And I guess my message is light is the best and the only means to get disinfection in as to what's going on in the systemic court corruption.
Well, I'm sure Mark and Terry can probably speak to that, sadly, personally, about the corruption inside the court system there. I believe it's in Kentucky, if I remember correctly. And, it's not just Kentucky. It's all across the country. Now, we have quite a few documents here, Mark and Terry, that you sent over to me. I'm not sure if you want to show some of those documents and maybe show 3 or 4 of them and have Lisa give a chance to comment on that if that's what's necessary. But I'm pretty much open to roll with anything we got going on here. So whatever you folks want to do, I'm okay with.
Okay, yeah, Jim, we can go ahead and we can get started on that here in just a minute. But I just want to also add to what Lisa said, in that we have talked a lot about corruption in our previous interviews, and a lot of other people have talked about that. But what we see happening on such a grand scale across the country, it's just happening in all 50 states. And when you look at it happening on 2 ends of the spectrum, where adults are in the prime of their life with young children, or in the case of where Lisa was and is up to this very day with her father, with Adult Protective Services. And what they do is they make these allegations on both ends of the spectrum, and then they come after you in just about every way and depriving you of every right and protection that we might otherwise have. And so when we see this, we can talk about the corruption, but it really rises to the level, as I've mentioned before, to a seditious operation, what I think is to our internal destruction, to cause us to submit to a form of government or a way that is contrary to our known way of life and to what the protections of our constitutional rights, state and federal, afford us. And so that's why in getting the word out is so important, because like in Lisa's case and other families who have their estates, their entire livelihoods where they save up, not able to pass on generational wealth. That is a harm to our country, because there's all kinds of benefits that flow out from that. So whereas happening with the children and the adults, young families, and then on the other end, it really is a big deal, and it must be addressed. So as we do move into the documents, just for the sake of the topic today, Jim, you mentioned about first they steal your children and then they come and steal your money. And this is something that we kind of touched upon at the end of the last interview, is that we wanted to talk a little bit about the involuntary servitude aspect of it, the unlawfulness of that, as well as the extortion that's involved, and the unlawfulness of it, you know, in respect to our case and many other families who are placed in these situations. So we wanted to go ahead and get into those, and I'll just touch upon a few areas and just interject whenever either one of you feel led to. But on the first document, I just have a little bit of an outline.
Can I interrupt for 1 second? I just want to, you made such a important point, Mark. And actually, you talk about it as a spectrum going from, children to the elderly.
Yes.
But actually, I think what really I'd love to get across is actually, it goes the whole gambit. And people don't realize that actually it doesn't matter how old you are. You could be a teenager, you could be in your 20s, 30s. What happens is, what people don't think about, suppose you get into a car accident and you have brain traumatic injury. Even though you have family, okay, say you're, in your 20s, say it happens to your daughter or your wife or, a spouse, the government, through the local agencies, still come in through guardianships. So people think, well, that it's reserved for, for two segments of the population. Guess what? That's a myth, because anybody who for some reason becomes ill, whether it be a mental illness, having to do with even say kidney dialysis, something, whatever form it takes, that this is how they cull people through the local governments, and that's why it's a racket. This is how they make their money.
Mm-hmm. Didn't we just see that with Britney Spears? Right. Yeah. So that's,
and that's one of the things that I'm glad you brought up is there's we talk about child protective services here on this show in Family Court, but there is a whole you can have a whole channel on adult abuse, and you'd never have an empty time slot, because you'd be able to report on it all the time, just like with children. So they get you at both ends of the spectrum and all the ways in between. And what happens is children that come out of the foster care system, a lot of them end up in the prison system, the penal system, and they're still, they still are a cash, an ATM basically for the state.
Yes.
It just keeps going and going. I mean,
and it doesn't even matter. People think, well, as far as when you think about the elderly, that it means about having that they're wealthy. My research over the decade has shown that it doesn't matter whether you're rich, you're poor, doesn't matter your religion, doesn't matter the color of your skin. It doesn't matter what political affiliation you associate with. Especially from what I've been able to find out is that actually the bread and butter of this system of where they're doing the money laundering is through the Medicare.
Absolutely.
So, and that's how it operates. That operates for the children, and no matter adults, doesn't matter. That's That's their vessel.
Yeah, so really the question that is put forth before the American people is, what place have we given our government to do these things? I mean, when you talk about the adult protective services, this is a family matter, okay? The care of our parents or our relatives is a family issue, as well as our children. Unless there's a criminal matter involved, which in just about almost all of the cases on a large scale are not criminally related, then government has no business being involved in this. And so there's an usurpation of the powers that we, the people, gave our system of government to do these things to us, to injure us, to hurt us, to take upon themselves the oversight of every aspect of our life. And so that's why I say it's un-American, and it's important that the people understand what's happening, and that this is all being done under a safety and best interest disguise, as if government, that these corrupt people, these seditionists, are acting in a place that is not theirs. And so we need to fix this in some way. And so that's what we're doing as far as the outreach to information, and then joining people together to act and demand action from anyone who's willing to listen, because we have been to everybody that we can think of, and we're just turned away and ignored. And when you can't even get remedy or justice through your Department of Justice or your court system, then the question is, well, what are we the people supposed to do? What are we as people who took that oath, especially? I mean, this is across the board for every American, but I took that oath, and I'm not going to violate my oath. I'm going to be faithful to that. And that's the reason we put people under oath for these things, because there's a sacred trust to protect our freedoms. And these people that we have out there in our system of government are not doing that. And we have documented proof of that. We've shown that in many of our previous interviews, Jim. And we just want to show an additional atrocity today with some comments and help from Lisa, and we appreciate her being here. We just want to kind of jump right into the documents. So we do have several to show today. If we don't get through them all, hopefully we can continue another time. But the first part of this is the whole involuntary servitude aspect. And I type up a few talking points here about, we've shown the kidnapping of our children, that they were taken without any legitimate basis. There was an allegation. We are being, denied the protections of our Constitution, pursuant federal law, the right to pursue our happiness, the practice of our religion. And there is a penal U.S. code, an 18 U.S. code, chapter 77, that talks a lot about forced labor and involuntary servitude. And in our situation, Jim, we have refused to comply with services and what they alleged was a civil matter, okay? Because under ASFA, they say that in order for the state to get paid money, they want you to comply with services. And they use this as a tool to force you into all kinds of different things where they can get additional federal money. And then they use a lot of what they get out of that, they twist it and use it against people. And we've talked about that on a few other occasions, but you can see there in that document, it says any violation of chapter 77 is to be considered an organized criminal activity, okay, a RICO. And so if you scroll in there, a second paragraph at the top, the people can see that. And so where we're being subject to that, we're being deprived of our right to not be subject to involuntary servitude under the 13th Amendment of the Constitution, which you can see right there in paragraph C1, it's very clear. It says, except for punishment for a crime. So they're actually proceeding against us and other Americans as if we're criminals, doing all of these atrocious things to us and our children, but we're not charged with a crime. We're not subject to a review of a jury of our fellow citizens, which is an additional deprivation of our right. We already talked about that. But then you look in section 1584 there in C2, it says whoever knowingly holds to involuntary servitude, okay? And that's what they're doing with our children and other people's children who refuse to comply with services. They're holding one of our most precious assets, our children, or like in adult protective services, our adult parents, to servitude. And so that's a federal crime punishable for up to 20 years. If it involves kidnapping, just like the other severe penalties, we see that they can be in prison for any term of years or for life, or both. So, this also includes peonage. And people will say, what's peonage? Well, it's the condition of being a peon, where you basically become subservient or a serf to government control. And it says right there in section 1994 that the holding of any person to service, and this federal law was born out of a Supreme Court case back in the 1800s. I don't know the exact year, but people can find it out there. That kind of drove the enactment of this law. And it declares very clearly that for anyone placed in this kind of a condition, that the use of this kind of an action is it's null and void. Okay, so it'll say that on the next slide, that to hold any person in this kind of condition to an involuntary servitude, that all resolutions, acts, or orders, and if they use it in any state, it's void. So you go on to the second page, you'll see that in the liquidation of any debt, obligation, or otherwise. Now, an obligation would be, hey, I'm holding you to a service, but you have to go to a psychological evaluation. You've got to go to anger management. You got to go to family counseling. When there is no conviction of a crime, okay, it's just an assumed civil matter under which they really don't have any jurisdiction under that, because we, the people, didn't provide that to them. So it's already declared null and void. This has been in place for years and years and years. And so all of these other acts are now void to place us in this situation. So additional penal law 1581 talks again about anyone placing someone in this kind of condition is subject to additional penalties. And so when you again look at the bottom there, the U.S. Constitution, the 10th Amendment, I want the American people to take a look at this and ask themselves the question: where in our Constitution have we given the United States government or any state government the power to do these things to us? When our Constitution says if it's not written in there, okay, they don't have the authority to do this. And yet this is what they're doing. And they're controlling it by not allowing us any place for justice or remedy. And then even in the 8th Amendment, to be subject to a situation where you lose your children or your family estate, or you're subject to the extortion of child support when you haven't even been convicted of a crime and you're happily married and you're still married. You know, aside from the issues in respect to people who separate, and there are some questions even whether that's legitimate, it says cruel or unusual punishment shall not be inflicted. And yet here we are being subject to these things.
Lisa, let me kick it over to you for a quick second here. As an attorney in the legal system, why in your best estimate aren't these being followed? Is it because the entire judicial system is corrupted? Do they know it, and don't care about it? Are they not educated enough to know it?
It's even worse. Let's go back to our Congress. We cannot. That's where the root of it all starts. In fact, so that people really understand exactly how they're garnishing both Terri and Mark's income. They're both being garnished, and through what? Through what they call through the state calls child support enforcement. Okay, think about that. Child support enforcement. Now, people have been taken, their parental rights have been lawlessly terminated. And on top of that, not only have you just taken their most prized, their treasures, their whole being, their blood, their lifeline, and now on top of it, you've taken them away without due process. And then without due process, you're taking whatever pay they have and giving it to the state. Now, here's the thing. Now, actually, I really haven't done a lot of work with the child support and that end of things with the Child Protective Services. So when Mark and Terri told me about their, the bank garnishing their income and taking money out of their own bank, I thought to myself, okay, it just didn't make sense to me as an attorney or as a human being. I said, okay, how does that work? And so when they brought that to my attention, I started I wish I had more time to have done more research, but it really knocked me off my chair. I'm like, how is that possible? So what happens is that there's through legislation with the foster care, okay, what happens is that it's through the federal government and the Title 4E of the Social Security Act that they're doing this through. So what happens is, so we're talking about child support obligations. Now, supposedly, you would think child support means what? That money is going to go directly to the child for whatever needs the child may have. It's so beyond the pale that they can't even do that. What happens is the money that they're garnishing from the child support obligations goes directly back to the government. So it's a recovery, a debt recovery.
Well, not only that, but the all of that we talked about on this show before, up to 25% of all the fees for the anger management class, for the drug rehabilitation classes, for all these different hoops that people have to jump through and have to pay, 25% of that money goes right back to the court system. It's a racket. It's a racket, frankly.
That is exactly a racket, because what they're doing is the federal government is supposedly mandating, saying that the state supposedly must recoup to reimburse for whatever expenses that they're using through the foster care program. But and so here we go. It's a catch-22, right? Or the dog chasing the tail. Okay, so the state has this incentive they need to get funding, so therefore they need to increase the placement of kids into the system.
Oh yeah, we've had Sylvia Beachy on the program here, and there's actually a quota. I'll tell you what. We're about halfway through here. Let's take a minute for Lisa. Why don't you start first? Tell us a bit about where we can find out more about you. Any websites? I know you have a new venture that you're kicking off. I think just pretty recently. Tell us about that, and then Mark and Terry will go over to you and give you the opportunity to give out your websites and stuff like that, and then we'll continue on with the slides. Go right ahead, Lisa.
Well, because I am a whistleblower exposing what's going on in the court system, initially the web host who was doing my original hosting my website, they decided to shut me down, saying that it was against their policy for my having my website putting up the information, informing people. So thank you to them. I have now been able to get onto a completely different host, and it's called thecourtracket.com. And that is dedicated to having people understand exactly what is going on in the court system. And right now, I've got up there, it's still a work in progress. So I haven't been able to get everything up right away that I had on my original site, but there will be information about that civil racketeering action and the various cases that I am exposing. I'm also have been honored to be able to connect with Attorney Richard Chambers, and we'll be we're hoping to put together a video podcast pertaining to firearms and the Constitution and talking politics.
Okay, so it's the court. What is it again?
Thecourtracket.com.
Thecourtracket.com. Okay, Mark and Terry, if you want to give out your website information and where people can find out more about you, we've already got the next slide loaded up. We can kick back over there. I know we've got quite a few slides to get through. I'm not sure if we'll do it, but I'll kick it over to you to have you give out your websites and where people can support you both.
Hi, Jim. Thanks. The best way for people to get in touch with us is they can email us at letourchildrengo@protonmail.com. Letourchildrengo@protonmail.com. They can direct message me on Twitter @NoLongerIgnored. If people want to support us, they can take a look at our Give Send Go at it's givesendgo.com/saving our family. And then also we are starting an organization to help support families and to bring more exposure to what's happening. And people can find out more about that at letourchildrengo.org. And that's still a work in progress, but it's getting up and running a little bit. So letourchildrengo.org, and then also through email at letourchildrengo@protonmail.com. And that's, if anybody wants to reach out to us regarding our case specifically, or if you're a family member that is dealing with this issue and you need support, we have a great support system of families and advocates, and we'd be happy to be able to help in that way.
Thank you. If you want to support this broadcast, of course, you can go to northwestlibertynews.com. That's northwestlibertynews.com. Okay, we're going to get back over to the slides here, and do you remember the last one there? And you probably do. So
we got it.
There's the next one. You want to go ahead and set this up for us?
Yeah, well, along the lines of what I was saying before, these were additional documents that we received in the mail, and just to set it up before you go to your break, Jim, is that we're just going to establish that because of our right to refuse services under the Constitution, state and federal, we're going to show that we refuse that.
No, I'm going without a break today. So go right ahead. Just go ahead and roll.
Oh, okay. We're just going to keep on.
Yeah,
going.
that was
All right.
That was the break. Go right ahead.
Yeah. So okay. Well, down there on the bottom in the lower right hand corner, I circled an area there where it says that that we will not cooperate with services. That's our right to do that. Being that there was a non-criminal matter, we're not convicted of anything, so therefore we're not subject to that. But they're holding that. They're holding our children from us pursuant to that under the disguise of safety and best interest. So if you go on to the next slide, you'll see that as a result of that at the top, that you'll see that because of that, our children were moved from a temporary custody situation to a permanent custody situation. And then contrary to what the original ruling of the court was at the time, if you can call it a court, that initially they were supposed to be placed with one family, and then they were being split between two. And there's really a question as to what kind of a situation our children were placed in, a relative or a foster care, because the girlfriend of Terry's father is just that. She's not a relative. She's just a girlfriend. So did they place our children in a situation where it looks like a relative placement, but it's really not? Are they really getting paid the big foster care money as a foster care provider, as a non-relative? These are the questions that we wanted answered pursuant to an investigation, because we have received information from a reliable source that the amount of money involved in the theft of our children totals over $2 million, up to almost $2.9 million that they could be receiving at either through the state and or through the foster care provisions. And so when you look at that amount of money, Jim, you know that the state is getting paid a lot of money and having our kids stolen, kidnapped, that they're coming back after us and other parents for child support. I mean, it's just ridiculous that, it's a double dipping of sorts. And, so I just wanted to show that as we go forward that.
It's not of sorts. That's exactly what it is.
Worse than double dipping.
It's
called extortion and embezzlement.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, they not only get money from, and here's the thing: you sadly, you folks have 7 children that were kidnapped from you, and multiply that what those numbers you just handed out by 450,000 children a year probably go into the foster care system. I mean, just do the math, folks. Do you understand why this is so guarded and so protected, and why there's such a machine that's keeping this going? It's because there's billions and billions and billions of dollars involved.
And they do it under stealth. They do it in the dark. But look who is really aiding and abetting, or probably worse than aiding and abetting. I mean, they're facilitating is Congress. See, here's the thing. Where's the oversight and accountability? So as
Yeah.
I talked about, this is facilitated through the Social Security Act. Okay, really, Congress is going to what, self-correct and audit themselves? Yeah, we already know how that goes, right?
Yeah, so where this started for us, Jim, if you go on to the next slide, we got the next document out of the court file November 23rd, 2016. And this kind of correlates to what we showed in the previous interview as far as the evidence of a forgery, and that you'll see that fade out on the writing, and yet you'll see, cuts along the lines, but even the black lines that run across it. But the reason I included this slide in this sequence is that down there on the left-hand side, a little bit lower than halfway down, you'll see an arrow, and you'll see it will say pay support. So there was an annotation on a document starting on the line above it and to the right, says parents to pay support. And this was a document that was placed in the court file. I don't know when it's placed in the court file, but it's dated May 18, 2016. Now we were not, as we recall, notified of any requirement through the court at the time to pay support. And so this kind of just shows that there was a beginning attempt to establish that. And if you go on to the next slide, I showed this document in previous interview, but this came to us through a court-appointed attorney. And I just included this page here for the sake of people seeing the two-page document again. But if you go on to the next slide, you'll see that this is one where it shows that the child has been calculated, wage assignment has been signed. All right, and this was established on apparently June 8, 2016. So we didn't really know about any of this until I started seeing a significant reduction in my military pension in August of 2016. And
wait, what does that mean? Child has been calculated and wage assignment has been signed. Child has been calculated. Sounds to me like you really are just nothing but a number. You're an ATM. Child has been calculated. Does that mean what I think it is?
You're a commodity.
Yeah.
That's a commodity.
Yeah, and so here's the other part of it, Jim, is that just on a two-line scribble on a apparently shoddy, probably most likely a forged document, they're able to just extract your financial property without any due process, without a hearing. We were never notified of a hearing, that in respect to a child support thing, because for us, there was no child support issue. There was no custody issue. So there could never be a legitimate place for this. And if you go on to the next slide, I'll show a couple pieces of mail that we got showing what we received. And this started back on, this was dated July 6, 2016. If you scroll in, you'll just see the number that they threw up there, beginning with me, the amount of money that they're saying that was past due on that amount. And then the next slide, it'll show it for Terri. So there's all this verbiage or language in here as to why, you need to pay or else, right?
And here's the thing, because, and as Mark says, but they're not, Kentucky is not even following their own rules. I was looking up some of the code regulations, and 407.5704, and it says it's initiation by Cabinet for Health and Family Services of support proceeding under convention. There's this whole procedure set out that is supposed to happen. That obviously, as you can see, they have it, in writing as to, their supposed procedure and policies, but they're not even following those unlawful policies.
Well, one shouldn't be surprised that they wouldn't follow the law to extort money and kidnap people's children. I guess I'm not all that shocked. You know where I'm coming from. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right.
So, Jim, if we can go on to the next slide, not only did I get one, but Terri also got one. If you go to the previous one from this one, I just want to show the figure that they put up there for Terri in the top right-hand corner. Now, Terri, since we have been married, has been fully engaged as a mother and a domestic manager. This was her lifestyle choice that she was very happy in doing. So she was raising our children. She was doing an outstanding job. And so, she wasn't an outside the home, being employed outside the home in any way. So I'm going to talk about this in a couple minutes because we think that there's an attempt to place her in a situation of forced labor. That, if she doesn't pay all of this, then she could be subject to, whatever they want to throw at her in respect to unlawful penalties when, this is not a life course that she chose for herself. So how can she be forced to be placed in a situation like that and the threats that are associated with it? So go on to the next slide.
Hold on, I just want to, if I can just make a point, Jim, just to reiterate to the audience and, the people that are taking this in, as you look at those two things, that we are married. We've been married for many years. And so as you can see in those documents, they're not just coming after us as a couple for child support. They're coming after us individually for child support.
I think each and every person that's involved in signing these documents, up to and including the judges, have committed a crime against you and deserve to be punished based upon the crimes that they've committed. I mean, this is outrageous. I mean, you don't even have it. You didn't even work. You didn't have. I don't mean you didn't work. I mean, you didn't work.
Right. I was a stay-at-home mom, homeschooling our 7 children, and so they kidnap our children. And then they tell me I've got to go get a job to pay them money to take care of my children that they have stolen from me.
Let me just add one thing. In doing my research on that, what actually happens is I can see that there was this report that shows that parents are losing their children because they don't have enough money. So here they come in, take your children, say, because you're too poor, then they make it so that they take your child but you have to then be able to somehow get more money to get back your children, but you can never do that, right? So they get them on this, again, servitude.
Yeah, and Jim, I just want to say that the whole impact on this is not to the benefit of the family at all, especially the parents. The parents are destroyed. Their livelihoods are destroyed. Their ability to retain even a decent counsel is severely inhibited. They might at best get a court-appointed attorney, and we know what goes on with that in just about a lot of the cases. They're all part of the scheme, and they're only going to work on behalf of ultimately the people in the system. And so, as we were going through this, and we can go on to the next slide.
And I just want to say, we've probably mentioned this before, but when Mark says they're part of the scheme, at one point, Mark was assigned a public defender who was the daughter of the prosecuting attorney's office for CPS.
Yeah.
Systemically, the conflicts of that type of thing is it's just routine. That is so commonplace, and that is the problem when you have that type of
incestuous, sort of an incestuous relationship. I mean, in a sense. I mean, in the sense of the workplace, incestuous, of course.
And let's not forget the private attorneys too, though, because
we're not going to forget the attorneys, Lisa. We're not going to
don't think it's just the public defenders.
Oh yeah, we're not going to forget the attorneys when all the smoke clears. Believe me.
And that daughter is actually the one who initiated the child support action. Her name is Annie O'Connell. She's the daughter of Mike O'Connell, who is the county attorney for Jefferson County in Louisville, and she is now a judge in Jefferson County.
So, Jim, when you look at this action that we're disclosing, okay, Lisa talked about the crime, the criminal aspect of it, the deprivation of our rights to not be subject to this. But in an additional way, what we have shown so far is an infiltration into this system, and that there is a behind the scenes control, most likely, and the association of this action to our, egregious injury, especially financially, the ability to, pursue our happiness and maintain a sustainable livelihood is compounded with the fraud. So we can show the fraud, and this is a compounding of the fraud. And so I want to tell a little story with this document, in that early in 2016 or 2020, when we were attempting to withdraw funds from our account, we discovered that our account was frozen, that we could not access it. And we later found out by way of our engagement with the teller, and then through documentation that we received in the mail, that it was due to the child support. So I just want to show that we kept a minimal balance in there, but we attempted to go back, and then this was what happened. Was, you'll see in the first paragraph that there was an order to freeze the funds in our account. And so as you go down, you'll see on the second page that, or on the next page at the top, that it'll show that it was for the child support enforcement action, which, there was no notification of a hearing that, hey, we're going to freeze access to your financial resources. They just did it, and it was like, how is it that this happens? Is where it's one thing to take a certain amount of money, which is also criminal, but then to deny you access to something that belongs exclusively to you without any kind of a hearing or declaration, and then you just get a document in the mail. It's just outrageous. And so we just wanted to show that this is just how they operate. And so there's
and even when you do get to have a hearing, if that ever, that happens, then you don't even get to submit your proof. So when they won't even feign as though there's a hearing, you're handcuffed and you're not even allowed to be able to show your evidence and be able to defend yourself.
And then they put a gag order on a lot of times put a gag order on you. So they kidnap your children, they extort you, they change records, they make up false comments and false entries in your file, and then they put a gag order on you so you can't even go to the press, you can't talk to anybody about it, even to defend yourself. Folks, this happens every day. It's happening today somewhere. So lots of times. And even when you want to go
when you want to go file something, say pro se, oftentimes, and I think Mark and Terry can tell a story about this, that when you go file something, the clerk's office oftentimes will tell you, oh, you can't file that. Well, so you've got the gatekeeper there who won't let you file actual things that you're allowed to file.
Well, we found a trick around that. As a matter of fact, I should say a trick, but we found a method. Go right towards the very end of the day. If they close at 5, get there about 4:57. When these people, of course, state employees, they don't want to hang around much longer, not 1 minute later. So a lot of times they don't really check your documentation very well because they want to get the heck out of there. They just stamp whatever it is, put it in your file, and they get ready to go home. I've heard that works.
Well, damn, I missed that trick.
Yeah, so Jim, and continuing on with the documents, we just want people to know that because of our previously submitted complaints to the Department of Justice on this massive fraud scheme perpetrated against us, which to this day we have not received specific information pursuant to it. We have received some responses attempting to dismiss it, but we've kept running it up the channels, and we have not gotten a response from the highest authority that we submitted this to. We attempted to work this for relief through the Department of Justice, and we've gotten no response. But if you go on, if you take a closer look, this is the actual attachment to the documents, and it just kind of shows of what number they're saying that Terri needs to pay. And it's fraudulent. So, and it places her in a situation of distress because she feels that, oh, well, if I don't go out and submit myself to a place of being in a place of involuntary servitude, that, that they might do something. Well, we're waiting for that relief and justice through the Department of Justice. And we want to know why we have not received a response, why we have not received our children back in light of all the criminal activity, and all the other things that we've submitted. So if you go on to the next slide, you'll see that there was an additional piece of paper where there was a response. And because of our attempt to reach the high officials in the Department of Justice, that's kind of what it looked like. But if you go on to the next slide, I want to show people where we have the protection of federal law from these things, especially in respect to Terri and me for that matter. But 18 U.S. Code Chapter 77, if you remember, any violation of this chapter is to be considered, not optional, is to be considered a racketeering or RICO operation. So this is another part of it that I talked about before about forced labor. It says whoever knowingly provides or obtains the labor or service of a person by any one of the following means. And it talks about, the threatened abuse of law or the legal process based on the threats of force, physical restraint, or threats of physical restraint to a person. In paragraph 4, it says that if you don't do this, that person would suffer serious harm or physical restraint. And then it defines it a little bit lower in subsection C, 1 and 2. But in paragraph B above that, it says whoever not only benefits financially from anything of value. Now, what we know is that the state does benefit financially from this. And I haven't been able to verify this yet, but I have picked up information that the federal government provides a certain amount of money for every dollar that they receive. And maybe Lisa can help with that based on the amount of money that they take from you in child support. So then the state would then be in violation and subject to criminal penalty under this, or those associated with it, whoever facilitated and perpetuated it. And then if you look at the definitions of the terms of abuse and threat of abuse of a legal process, it defines it, whether it be administrative, civil, or criminal, for any purpose for which the law was not designed. Now, we clearly have shown that there's no custody issue for us. And like I said before, there's issues with people where there even is custody issues as to whether this is even relevant to them. But in our case, especially, you know, the federal government acknowledges that our children are a form of tax exempt property. That's why you get exemptions on your tax returns, as I understand it. And so we're being subjected to all of these penalties, and then the identification of a serious harm, whether physical, non-physical, psychological, financial, you know, right down there at the bottom. Under all of the surrounding circumstances that we brought forth, it says that if a person is compelled to perform labor or service in order to avoid incurring that harm, which, you know, well, I guess, you know, you're made to feel like you need to do this when we're not really required to do this under this federal law or our Constitution. And then on the next page, you'll see that whoever violates that section is to be in prison 20 years or fined or both. And then if it includes kidnapping, which it did occur in our case fraudulently, that there can be a term of years of life or both. And so here we are, you know, still waiting on our form of government to see the crime that we have reported and to receive justice, not just in respect to the protections of Terri and our children, but for me as a veteran, because like you'll see in the ensuing slides, Jim, they are continuing to just take the money right out of my military pension. And I mentioned in the last interview, it was over $30,000. And if they're already getting paid large amounts of money from the American taxpayers, why are we the people being subjected to these things? You know, we should not be. And yet here we sit. So,
well,
yeah, go ahead.
My hope is that this whole imprisoned for any term of years or life or both now gets ramped up to execution, since they've reinstated the federal execution. Hopefully these people that they knowingly kidnap children for money, they need to be executed. I don't want to pay for them for the next 25 years. Why do I have to pay for them? Execute them. They're predators. They need to be out of society. That's my thoughts.
Right. So I know we're going to be running out of time here in a few minutes, Jim, and I don't have many more documents to show, but I just wanted to show the people that what we have said today and our previous interview that we can show. This is a statement from my retirement system that will show that my garnishment, and halfway down on the right-hand side, that it's just being taken out involuntarily. And if you go on to the next slide, it will show what it's for. In the top left-hand corner on the next slide, for the Kentucky Division of Child Support. And so this was taken, you know, this was out at the beginning of the year. And then if you go to the next one, it'll show the document at the end of the year. So this has been going on since 2016. And it just shows throughout the year that they're doing this. And if you move on to the next slide, we'll just transition to the next point. We talked about in the previous interview, Jim, that they're also taking the money that we were given under the COVID Relief Act earlier in the year. And this was the envelope that documents came in. If you go on to the next slide, you'll see the letter that we received as signed by President Trump. And it says that for the purpose of getting this payment, the priority was our health and safety, economic relief. And, you know, people can go back and read through that, but we don't even think that this amount was configured properly in our case, because as we understood it, the way the payment should have totaled out, it should have been more than this. But they established that number that people can see there in the form. And just for the sake of time, if you go on to the next slide, in a separate envelope, we got this document saying that on the same date, taken right for the sake of the child support, just went right in. So I guess our health and safety isn't as important as these criminals getting paid money that we, the people, pay them to give us for our relief.
They're just robbing you.
They're
just robbing you. They're just flat out robbing you. They're just crooks.
Yeah. So without due process, right, without any charge or conviction of a crime, just continued theft of our financial property, which has severely hurt our ability to survive in comparison to other Americans who do get these relief payments in the midst of a very difficult situation. It's just a compounding level of harm that's just outrageous. And then if you go on, well, we'll get to the next slide here in a minute, but this kind of covers all the points that we want to talk about in respect to child support. But you know, Jim, if we have time here to close this out, I just want to kind of go over a couple of things. We've clearly established fraud in respect to our case, and we know that there's fraud happening in a lot of people's cases. If you go on to the next slide, I'll talk about this real quick as we go forward. But there was a Supreme Court ruling back in the 1800s in a case titled U.S. versus Throckmorton, and Lisa may be familiar with it. But one of the things that the justice opinioned was that there's no question of the general doctrine that fraud vitiates the most solemn contracts, documents, and even judgments. So where you can show fraud, it vitiates everything. What that means is, in a legal definition, that it negates or invalidates it. All right, so all of these actions that are being taken against us in respect to the theft of our children, the deprivations of our rights, all the criminal activity, you know, the withholding of our financial resources is negated because it's all fraudulent. It's not based in any authority that we the people gave the people who are enacting these things and facilitating and promoting them. And then I wanted to show just real quick before we go to our closing comments, a summary of the amount of criminal activity that we have highlighted in reporting these to all of our channels in the state of Kentucky, as well as the federal government. The first few are tied into what happened to us directly in respect to the taking of our children and the deprivations of honest services, which again, that is what fraud is defined as. And then the other associated crimes. But there were many misdemeanors that were completely ignored from law enforcement and prosecuting agencies, civil remedy agents, private attorneys. But there are felonies that are still out there that have not been addressed. And we're coming up on the 5-year statute of limitations for felonies. And yet we still to this day have not heard of any arrests or any justice or any returns. And, you know, we demand justice. When we take our Pledge of Allegiance, you know, and at some point, just about every American, I don't know about everybody, but we all take that pledge for liberty and justice for all. And when we see these crimes happening, not just to ourselves, but to other Americans, we have a duty to stand up and demand justice. How do we have peace in our country? How can we make America great again if we don't even have our children and we have criminal activity operating to destroy us from within? It just cannot happen. And so the
90 seconds.
So we just can't tolerate it.
We are running out of time here on the show, as you can hear that. Why don't you go ahead and really quick give out your websites, and then we'll go over to Lisa and have her do the same. Go right ahead, Mark and Terri.
Yeah, we can be reached at letourchildrengo@protonmail.com. You can direct message us on Twitter at @NoLongerIgnored. And our website is letourchildrengo.org. Thank you, Jim.
Welcome, Lisa. We're over you.
60 seconds.
You can follow me on Twitter at TPCLJ. Again, my website, thecourtracket.com. I just want to sum it up by saying that, you know, people have to realize we all have skin in the game. So I'm hoping that collectively we're going to stand up for each other. 2 words, Jim: government extortion.
Got it, Jet. Thanks so much for both of you being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Criticaldisclosure.com, northwestlibertynews.com. Till next time, this is James White saying bye now.
10 seconds.